Welcome to Experimental, the science show that gives sheep a hard time and turns snails on. Coming up, will this man drown in welly boots? And is this fish farting or trying to tell you something? But first, let's see what happens when computer games break out of the computer. Worried mothers, ambitious politicians and self-important doctors all like nothing better than a loud moan on the subject of how video games are turning our children into couch potatoes. So we're pleased to have located a scientist, Dr. Chuk of the Nanyang Technological University in Singapore, who has managed to take the video game off the couch and onto the streets. Literally. Welcome to the world's first augmented reality video game.
I realised that we've reached kind of a point in gaming where it's actually removing interaction between people, and I really wanted to change that, bring the gaming back into the real world, so actually once again we're socialising and playing together.
To achieve this feat, Dr. Chuk first turned to augmented reality, something that he had already been working on. It's technology that allows computer images to be seen against a backdrop of the real world.
To develop this system, we need to merge the real world and the virtual world. So what we do is we create this head-mount display system where you put this device on your eyes. So what you can do is actually you can see the real world, but all the virtual objects on top of it as well.
The computer knows where to place its images in the real world thanks to a tiny motion sensor, which can track your head movement in 3 directions. And it's not just for tabletop battles.
For education, we're actually developing a kind of mixed reality classroom for children. They'll be able to see solar systems or history or evolution on their tabletop and be able to learn using all this 3D mixed reality information.
But how did Dr. Chuk get from mixing real and computer images on a tabletop to a street gaming child slimming concept?
100 meters, turn left to Tyersall Avenue.
You know that annoying little voice in the car?
300 meters, turn left and turn left.
Yes, that's right, sat nav. He realised that by combining it with his augmented reality system, he and his friends could take to the streets and play their own version of Pac-Man. But there's one tiny problem.
Unfortunately, most kind of consumer GPS systems are only accurate for about 5 to 10 metres. So we use a RTK GPS system.
Normal GPS uses signals bounced off satellites to track a position. However, it's only accurate to within a few metres. RTK, or real-time kinematics, uses a ground station in addition to the satellites. Because the ground station is nearby, the RTK system is accurate to within a few centimetres. Perfect for chasing your mates with pinpoint accuracy. With his new super-accurate guidance system, Dr. Chuk could finally realise his dream of playing Pac-Man outside in the fresh air. And his first battleground, the university car park.
You put on your wearable computer and your head-mount display, and then suddenly your real world becomes transformed. And so you actually now are experiencing a kind of game where you feel like you've picked up your body and put it into a Pac-Man game.
Let the games begin. The idea is to spot virtual yellow dots hanging in mid-air, run around, gobbling them up. Meanwhile, your playing partner is after you. When she looks through her goggles, she sees you as a big yellow blob, and her job is to ignore the dots, track you down, and eat you up. After that, it's game over. It's just a prototype at the moment, but in the future, games like these may be just the thing to get lazy kids off the sofa and playing in the middle of the road again, just like the old days. Although judging by the games they play now, Dr. Chuk had better make sure his equipment doesn't break easily.
She got me. She got me.
In a moment, we'll be dragging sheep and feeding Snails Prozac. But first, let's have a drink in the test department. The test department would like to show you how to open a bottle of wine with a large tree. First, ask the owner of the tree if it's okay to nail some padding to it. If not, use tape to secure the padding. Padding will stop the bottle smashing and protect the tree. Then, wearing gloves and eye protection just in case, start to bang the bottom of the bottle against the tree. Oh, go on. You can do it harder than that. No, go on. Even harder. Oh, not that hard, though. What happens is that the shock of the wine bottle hitting the tree is transferred through the wine itself and then hits the bottom of the cork. After about 30 seconds of banging, the cork will be knocked out by the shockwave. Very practical.
Yeah.
Coming up on Experimental, why some fish fart and why some toads are more slippery than others. But before we answer that great question, let's go and wrestle with some hairy beasties. Outback Australia, land of more than 100 million sheep, and every one of them in need of an annual haircut. If it's bad for the sheep, how much worse for the shearers? Giving more than 200 short back and sides a day makes the shearer's job one of the toughest in the world. As occupational safety engineer, John Culvener explains.
Shearing is a rag bag of occupational hazards. The sheep shearers experience a rate of injuries many times that of the average worker in Australia.
Sheep are heavy, greasy and alive, and every one of them has to be picked up onto its back and dragged out of the pen to the shearing station. Apparently, what you're dragging them across can make all the difference. Shearer Bob Kirkpatrick sheared his first sheep at the age of 11.
When you start dragging them out, you've got hold of their front legs, one hand on each front legs, and you're dragging the sheep with its full weight across the battens.
The saying was that Australia was riding on the sheep's back, but I think all along they were riding on the shearers' backs as well.
So Culvener and his team dedicated themselves to discovering ways to save the shearer's back by making life a little easier. They set out to scientifically measure the best surface to drag a sheep on, and Experimental decided to do the same. We connected our sheep shearer, Brent Nash, to a heart rate monitor and measured his pulse rate as he dragged 20 sheep over 3 different surfaces. First, a flat floor made of wooden battens. Batten direction is of course vital. In Bob's day, they ran crossways.
Now with the batten going crossward, if the sheep's kicking at all, you can get a grip on these boards and throw you back this way. Whereas, if the battens are running this way in the catching pen, there's nothing at all for the sheep to catch its back feet on.
Fascinating. And the heart rate for the traditional wooden floor was?
161.
Not bad. Next, the mesh floor.
As far as dragging sheep on a mesh floor goes, it's a lot harder, and I suspect the explanation is that the sheep can have a lot of grip.
There's a lot of resistance there as you're dragging out the wool's catching on the mesh. So I'd say it's not a very good option for a catching pen floor. Heart rate 166.
A bit high, that. Finally, what may be the biggest thing in shearing since the invention of sheep. All the gripless advantages of the wood floor, but with added slope.
Once you've got the momentum up, the sheep's actually coming with you, and then you're out on the board and it's a lot easier.
And that's not the only reason sheep handlers like a sloping floor. Apparently, there's nothing they like to see more than a load of sheep's bottom.
The natural defence of a sheep seems to be to walk uphill. So if the catching pen has a slope away from the door, then the sheep tend to look the other way.
So, surprising a sheep from behind makes them easier to catch. And heart rate for the sloping wooden floor was
158.
victory for the sloping floor. New hope for shearers everywhere and a major breakthrough for Australian science. Proof that gravity works, even down under. And finally, for anyone hoping to repeat this experiment at home, here's a last word of advice from Bob.
If you hold a sheep properly, or quietly or tenderly like I'm holding this one, it's all right. But you hold them a bit rough, they're like a Sheila, they'll never forgive you.
In a moment, snails on drugs. But first, let's try and drown Horace in the test department. It's often said that if you fall into the water with Wellington boots on, they'll fill up and pull you to the bottom. Let's apply a bit of science to the theory. First, how much does a welly boot full of water weigh? 6 kilos. Now the scientific experiment. Let's see if our demonstrator drowns when he attempts to swim in the wellies. Oh, that's a bit disappointing. It's a bit splashy, but he's definitely not heading for the bottom. Why? Well, partly because the boot is largely full of foot, not water, but there's another reason the prophets of doom have forgotten. Let's weigh those boots again. Only 500 grams. Why? Because water in water weighs, well, pretty much the same as the water that's around it.
Don't try this at home.
Still to come on Experimental, Dr. Fong will turn on his snails, whilst the test department will measure the friction coefficient of the African fire-bellied toad. Scotland, land of rugged mountains, mist-shrouded glens and very disturbing noises coming out of the lochs. Noises that sound a bit rude. At Dunstaffnage Marine Laboratory near Oban on Scotland's west coast, two scientists, Doctors Ben Wilson and Bob Batty, are up late doing weird things to a tank full of herring, determined to discover whether fish fart. A few months earlier, Wilson had been playing sounds to herring. He wasn't expecting the fish to reply.
I wasn't actually trying to record sounds from the fish. I was interested in how they responded to sounds that I was making, but I was just monitoring the noise that was in the tank anyway. And then while I was doing it one evening, I had the lights down low, I was getting ready for my experiment, I had my finger on the play button ready to play one of the sounds, and all of a sudden there was this loud, well, farting sound. And immediately I thought, practical joker, somebody else in the lab mucking around. So I flicked the lights on and there was nobody around. It was just me and the fish, and that was it.
Mysteriously, whenever the lights went on, the farting stopped.
I became convinced that it was the fish, but they were only doing it when they had the lights out and things were dark and I couldn't actually see what they were doing.
If he were to prove his fish were farting, Dr. Wilson would have to catch them at it. He didn't have the gear to film underwater in the dark. Luckily, he knew a man who did. Time to call Dr. Bob Batty.
My reaction was, well, laughter at first, because Ben played this sound to me over the telephone. And it just sounds ridiculous when you hit it with a phone.
What did it sound like?
Well, like a high-pitched raspberry.
So Wilson and Batty set up their infrared lights and underwater cameras and kept watch over the herring, deep into the wee hours.
That's working out right.
And after hours in the dark, patiently monitoring their wind instruments, Wilson and Batty sent victory.
It was a really exciting moment. Finally, there it was. We actually had on the video the fish, bubbles coming out of its anal pore, and we had the sound as well. We realised that that's exactly what's happening. It was quite an exciting moment.
Success at last. They'd finally caught the herring farting. But being scientists, they needed a more formal term for the phenomenon.
I thought, we can't really call it a fart sound. It sounds like a fast repetitive tick, and the acronym for that is FRT, so we thought that would stick.
And stick it did. But this wasn't the time to celebrate. Two big questions remained. How and why were the herring farting? Perhaps clues lay in how the herrings spend their day. Wilson and Batty turned their attention to the swim bladder, the herring's buoyancy control organ. During the day, herrings school at depth, but at night they migrate up to the water's surface and gulp in air to refill their swim bladders. Perhaps the herring were using the organ as an underwater whoopee cushion. Wilson and Batty already knew that herring release bubbles, sometimes lots of them, especially when there are predators about.
Fishermen have known about it for a very long time. You can tell a school of fish at sea because you see a slick on the water where these bubbles get to the surface, and then you can go and catch herring. And they also produce them when they're attacked by predators like killer whales and so on. They'll produce streams of bubbles from the swim bladder.
When threatened, herring can release large amounts of the air in their swim bladders in one quick burst. No one is really sure how the bubbles thwart the killer whales. Perhaps they interfere with the hunter's echolocation. Or perhaps, by dumping air, the herring are able to dive faster to take them out of harm's way.
Do you want to listen?
Yes, please.
Wilson and Batty knew that they didn't have a killer whale in their tank, so it couldn't be a fear response. And besides, they were only getting a few bubbles, and only at night. The scientists were baffled, and then they remembered the herring only fart in company.
Number of fart sounds that you record is proportional to the number of fish in the tank. So the more fish you have, the more FRT sounds per fish you get. So they only produce these sounds when they're in company. And that suggests to me that it's got some sort of social communicative kind of function. And what happens at night is these fish disperse, and there's a big question lurking: how do they stay in touch with each other so that when they can start schooling again in the morning? And one of the ways they might do that is to make these sounds.
So, unlike you and me, herring only fart in company.
Yeah, that's right. Farts are a social thing.
I wonder if herring can smell. Still to come on Experimental, something for the gamblers amongst you. But first, something a little less racy.
Hello.
Welcome to Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, the home of biologist Dr. Peter Fong and 500 of his favourite subjects, water snails. Snails he loves to give erections by dosing them with mind-altering drugs. But why?
Scientists often do have crazy minds, but actually there is some real science behind this, and that is that these snails are hosts for an important human parasite.
The snails, which live in the tropics, are host to the larvae of a parasitic worm. Once the worm develops, it leaves the snail and lives in the water until it meets up with an unsuspecting human foot, whereupon it gnaws its way into the flesh, eventually infesting the abdomen and liver. Ultimately, their eggs are secreted in human urine, eaten by the snails, and the whole process starts again.
Now, if that worm is in your body for a long time, it can eventually kill you.
So the point of Dr. Fong's research is to find ways of reducing the snail's numbers by breaking the cycle of the worm's development. And that's where the erections come in. Now, most scientists would get out the poison and zap them dead, but not Dr. Fong. He wanted to find a way of knocking them out in the kindest way possible.
For this experiment, I'm drugging the snails with Prozac.
Now, in humans, a dose of Prozac is known as the happy drug, designed to make you feel good. But what happens when you give an antidepressant to a snail? Does it kill it dead? Does it make it crawl round in circles in a happy kind of way? No, none of these things.
In humans, Prozac causes sexual dysfunction. In these snails, if you give them Prozac, it gives them a full erection of the penis.
Being snails, getting a stiffy takes a little time. 12 hours to be precise. So whilst we're waiting, a little anatomy lesson. Snails are hermaphrodite, which means that the same snail can be female one moment and male the next. With a great big shell covering their nether regions, the sexual organs, their penis and vagina, are located just behind the head. And if the snail decides to be male, it sprouts this massive horn-shaped knob. And sure enough, 12 hours after the squirt of Prozac, all Dr. Fong snails are in their male mode. All of them standing at attention, which can last for up to 48 hours. Great for the snail, but how is a weekend hard-on going to contribute to their demise?
When they copulate, one typically acts like a male, and the other typically acts like a female.
And that's the key to Dr. Fong's research. Because not only do most of the snails decide to stiffen up in a male sort of way when exposed to Prozac, but the resulting member is impotent. Large, but totally useless as an instrument of reproduction.
If we can stop them from reproducing, then perhaps we can limit the number of snails and limit the parasitic infections that are caused by worms that live in these snails and are parasites to humans.
Dr. Fong's long-term hope is that he can find a drug that turns Prozac's 48-hour stiffy into a lifelong and ultimately species-controlling hard-on. If he does, then much of the tropics might be rid of a debilitating disease. Finally, to the test department for the great toad conundrum. In the test department, our demonstrators are having a well-earned rest. They couldn't afford to buy a racehorse, so they opted to lose their monopoly money on the sport of zoologists: frog and toad racing. On the right, a white tree frog, and on the left, a fire-bellied toad. Yeah! Well, the tree frog is obviously faster than the fire-bellied toad. But now the racing is over, the question on the test department's minds is, which one is stickier? As this is real science we're doing here, there are no bets on the outcome. All we're interested in is ascertaining the hard facts behind interspecies amphibian stickiness. Until today, a gaping hole in human knowledge. A gap which we will fill with our amphibian adhesiveness monitor. But why are frogs and toads sticky in the first place? It's all to do with the fact that frogs not only breathe through their mouths, they also breathe through their skin, directly into their blood vessels. The moisture they secrete from special glands helps in this unique way of breathing, but it also makes them slippery. So is one of our little racers slippier than the other? Let's find out. Up they go on the adhesion monitor. It's pretty close, and the frog and toad adhere with equal measure. But hang on, it looks like the tree frog has hit the slippery slope. Suddenly it finds its fourth legs and starts to ascend rather than slip. So there we have it, conclusive evidence that the white tree frog is stickier than the fire-bellied toad. Welcome to Experimental, the science show that measures hairy men's fingers and takes blood from young lovers. Coming up, how to turn your urine into wine. Develop a totally new way of moving around and make the perfect sandcastle. But first, it's that loving feeling. Experimental has come to Pisa in search of, you've guessed it, love. Ah, love. It lifts us up where we belong. It turns up the volume of life and makes everything beautiful.
Things that you would otherwise view as being completely irrational and crazy, you think make perfect sense, even if you're not lucid at all.
We all know that love makes us do some odd things. But until neuroscientist Donatella Marazziti from the University of Pisa came along, no one knew why wrapping your arms around the greatest thing in the world made otherwise rational people do the craziest of things. And where did she look for the science of love? Where else but deep in the arms of lovers themselves?
When you are in love, there are different hormonal changes.
That's right, all that crazy behaviour, that kissing, cuddling, giggly stuff that makes love lovely, can be explained by the changes in just a few chemicals.
Are you involved in a love relationship? Yes. Qualcuno?
Si. To arrive at this rather miserable reduction of life's greatest state, Donatella compared the blood hormone levels of 3 groups of students for her studies. One, a bunch of singletons. Another group who'd been together in a relationship for over 2 years, and a final group who were the newly in love group, and that's the crazy bunch she was most interested in.
Everything's brighter, everything's bigger. It just like turns up the volume and the vibrance on life because everything's so much better.
Donatella's love group were in the early phases of their relationship, a time when we are preoccupied with our lovers to the exclusion of all else.
When I really fall in love with someone at the very beginning, I ignore everything else.
You can't stop thinking about them. Even, like, I guess waiting around for phone calls is the worst part of it.
I just sat by the phone every day.
You are only interested in the partner, how to meet him or her, how to dress for him or her. So there is an increase in what we call grooming activities.
Like, you want to look your absolute very best when you see somebody, because, I mean, you know, you want them to be absolutely crazy about you like you are about them, and you want to look your best.
So what are the chemicals whizzing around the grey matter that makes a greasy smear on the cheeks so fantastic? When Donatella looked at the blood from her love group and compared it to the singletons and those jaded souls in long-term relationships, she found that her lovers had much higher levels of the hormone cortisol. Oddly, this chemical is a stress hormone designed to make us nervous, which might explain that she loves me not syndrome that so many lovers sweat about. A second brain chemical that went out of whack in the love group was serotonin.
The most exciting finding of our study was that we found that romantic love in the early phase of the relationships present a decreased level of the serotonin system.
Serotonin is, in part, a mood-altering chemical, and the levels Donatella found in her love subjects were so low that if they weren't diagnosed as lovers, they'd be diagnosed as suffering from obsessive-compulsive disorder. But there's another shocker on the way.
Men become in some way more similar to women, and women become in some way more similar to men.
And that's all down to testosterone, the hormone that makes men men. Fall in love, boys, and the chemical that gives you your manhood drops away, explaining that sudden interest in female pursuits, like staring lovingly into another's eyes. Women, however, experience a boost in testosterone, which, luckily, does not make them instantly bearded, but does make them want to do things in bushes that we can't show on television.
Don't try this at home.
In a moment, we'll find out why these girls have abnormally long ring fingers. But first, some vintage fun in the test department. Toby is 5 days into an experiment to monitor every aspect of his health, which was great until he started it. However, since that day, it's deteriorated fast. Today, he's convinced he's got swollen lymph nodes, a definite sign of dengue fever. But on double-checking in the learned journals, he realises that that slightly stiff neck could be a symptom of meningitis instead. Luckily, his temperature is normal, but those sweats, could he be having a heart attack? But then perhaps that cramping pain could be a symptom of type 1 diabetes. And with that latest worry, Toby decides a quick urine test is in order. Huh? Blood in the urine. It can only mean, well, at least 85 conditions, some of them quite nasty. But let's check back through Toby's day to see if we can find the possible cause. Ah, beetroot. It seems that Toby could be one of 14% of the population who are beetroic. When most people eat beetroot, the substance that makes it red, beatenin, is destroyed in the stomach. But if scientists are right, the presence of oxalic acid in Toby's stomach means that the beatenin survives to get absorbed by the colon and ultimately dissolved in the urine. The result is an impressive colour, very like red wine, which gives Toby the idea of a rather mean joke. Coming up on Experimental, the boffins from Cornell University who think they've discovered a new way of...
Running is like running.
It's like walking.
But first, we go in search of some man digits. Meet Dr. Mark Brosnan, a psychologist at the University of Bath. He's not exactly God's gift to rugby. In fact, he's far more happy lurking in libraries. You could have worked that out for yourself if you'd had a chance to look at his hands.
The ratio of the ring finger to the index finger can potentially tell a great deal about somebody.
That's right. Study someone's fingers and you can tell how much of the hormone testosterone they were exposed to when they were in their mother's womb. Testosterone is the hormone that makes men big, hairy, and square-jawed. But that's not testosterone's only effect.
Exposure to prenatal testosterone is argued to influence the structure of the brain as it's developing within the womb. And that structure of the brain then goes on to inform how we learn and develop in childhood in combination with other factors, but it's provided the building block for what's going on to form the adult brain ultimately.
Testosterone is funny stuff. Not only does a good slug of it in the womb result in the fetus developing what some would call a male brain, but they'll also end up with a ring finger longer than their index finger. Because women in general receive less prenatal testosterone in the womb, they tend to end up with ring and index fingers that are pretty similar in length, and a brain that is less interested in cars and football. Men, on the other hand, tend to have a small difference in the length of the two digits. The bigger hit you got in the womb, and the bigger the difference. It may also be that you'll have developed a brain that is more interested in blokey-type things. By now, you're probably looking at your own index fingers and wondering how blokey you are. But look carefully. The average difference between the ring and index finger for a man is only 2%, hence the calipers. And don't worry, ladies, If you find you have a longer ring than index finger, you can still wear a dress. It doesn't mean you're a man. It only means that, like the test department's Melanie here, you may have more of an interest in explosions and other things that men find fascinating. And that's what got Dr. Brosnan thinking. It's often assumed that engineering and physics require a strongly male brain. And if that was the case, you'd expect people working in these sciences to have longer ring fingers than those working in the more, shall we say, effeminate disciplines like the social sciences. To see if this theory held any water, Dr. Brosnan measured the fingers of both sides of the academic divide. 100 digits later, he had an answer, but not the one he expected.
There were some unexpected findings in that the hard sciences, the physicists and the chemists, actually had a digit ratio and the finger length pattern that was typical of females, in that their finger length, their testosterone finger and their estrogen finger, looked to be of a similar length, which counteracted the original arguments that scientists would be extremely male-thinking, would have extremely long fourth fingers. Whereas my research was contradicting that and saying, actually, a great deal of scientists have got very long index fingers, more typical of the female profile.
This was rather embarrassing for the idea that a long ring finger was an indication of a male-type brain. So Experimental decided to commission Dr. Brosnan to measure the fingers of these aggressive little creatures, the University of Bath's women's rugby team. Here, there was no problem. Each and every one had a ring finger that towered over their stumpy little index digits.
4. Okay, that's the Premiership finger.
See? That means you're mad.
Premiership wife.
That means you're a man.
Not me here and
It does not. I could be a premiership wife.
And indeed, she is conclusive proof that testosterone can give you a male brain, a male finger, but not necessarily a male body. Still to come on Mad Labs, Billy Bunter plays with nettles. And we learn the science of sandcastle building. But first, what not to do at the dinner table. Anu is meant to be cooking lunch at the test department, but is more interested in demonstrating the strange characteristics of custard, a liquid that behaves like a solid. Don't believe me? Well, let's watch him play. After a brief whisk of the cheap powder variety, it's time to test its liquid properties. And I think we can say that custard is quite definitely a liquid. But what happens when you try and turn it into a ball? Suddenly it turns into a solid. What's happening? Well, it's all got to do with these little fellows, starch molecules. So long as the custard is just pouring out slowly, the starch molecules will slip along quite nicely in a liquid kind of way. But make the custard move too fast, and the starch molecules get tangled up with one another, whereupon the custard turns into a solid. As soon as the custard slows down again, the starch molecules untangle, and the custard behaves like a liquid once more. So next time someone tells you not to hit your dinner with a hammer, just smile and tell them it's an experiment in molecular physics. Before we end, Experimental will be doing strange things with pickled onions and attempting to build the ultimate sandcastle. But first...
Hello!
Experimental has come to Cornell University in Ithaca, New York, in search of these two chaps, Binoy Srinivasan and Andy Ruina, authors of a seminal work in Nature on the most efficient ways of moving from A to B on two legs.
Just ridiculous and sounds silly, but it showed that the least tiring way to get from one place to another if you're going slowly is to walk. And the more tiring way is to run.
All so laughingly obvious, you might say. But when they started analysing their findings in a computer model of the human gait, they made a rather interesting discovery. Their models suggested that there was another gait that was more energy efficient at intermediate speeds between walking and running.
It's sort of like a hybrid of walking and running.
It's like walking.
It's like running.
It's like running.
It's like walking.
It's walking, but with an aerial flight face. Now, you can't really know how to do it unless you put one foot in front of the other. That's more important.
Before we reveal to the world the wonders of this new way of getting from A to B without a taxi, we better find out exactly what goes on when we walk and run. A walk is like an inverted pendulum. Your foot lands, producing a force peak like this. It then pushes off, producing a second force peak. The key to walking is that both feet never leave the ground at the same time. When we run, things are a bit different. Apart from heavy breathing, we actually bounce off the ground, flying between steps. On the computer, this results in a single force peak, like this. And that's what got the boys thinking. According to their computer models, there was another possible gait, the pendular run. The legs would remain fairly straight, like in a walk, the heel hitting the ground, the foot pushing off, but unlike a walk, there would be a short hop, where both feet were off the ground. For speed slightly above walking, this theoretical gait was extremely energy efficient. But could anyone actually do it? Well, it took a lot of practice, but eventually the boys mastered it. A new way of getting from A to B was born. But is it any good?
I don't think that this particular research is going to have any direct applications for anybody. It does have a direct application for science in that it helps us understand what is running, what is walking, and it might be that it helps us understand a new gait which perhaps some people use sometimes.
Experimental disagreed. It seemed to us that getting from A to B faster than walking, but without the puff of running, was a great idea. So we persuaded the profs to hold a masterclass for a man off the street, in the hope that he'd go forth and evangelise this new way of moving.
Relax your upper body and give it a try. Good try, though.
I've given up, man.
I don't think anybody
Okay,
can do this.
Well, it's not true. I don't know what the this is, but I can do it, and these guys in Michigan can kind of do it, and it seems like you can't do it.
Sadly, it seems we chose the wrong man off the street. In a moment, we'll be finding out how science might help Miss Sandy Feet here avoid this. But first, let's have some pain in the test department. Billy Bunter is in the test department garden doing something very, very stupid in the name of science. He wants to test out a number of supposed cures for common garden stings. And what better person to test them out on but himself? First up, our old friend the nettle. Allegedly, rubbing dock leaves on the sting will give the required relief. And judging from the look on Billy's face, it does seem to help. But why would it? To produce a stinging sensation, the body has to be subjected to either a strong acid or its opposite, a strong alkali. Nettle stings are acidic, so jabbing them with an alkali of roughly the same strength should neutralise the stinging effect. But we think a slightly stronger alkali, like bicarbonate of soda, might work better. Next up, a wasp sting. These are alkali, so don't use bicarb, go for something acidic to neutralise it. Theoretically, nettles might work, but you'd have to get them to sting you only where the wasp stung. Far better, go for something like a pickled onion with its nice, acidic, vinegary sauce.
We'd like to point out
that no test department demonstrator was hurt in the making of this film. They blinking well were.
And finally on Mad Labs, beach science.
Maybe we need some shells.
Pretty much everyone who has ever visited a beach will have had a go at building a sandcastle. But there are some, like Sandy Feet, yes, that is her real name, who take things to extremes.
Everybody can build some kind of a sandcastle. It's not rocket science.
Well, it might not be rocket science to Sandy, but you head inland to Clark University in Worcester, Massachusetts, and to the labs of Dr. Arshad Kadroli and Dr. Azeda Samadani, and it suddenly becomes rocket science. Their work is all about how each individual grain of sand in a sandcastle sticks together. And the key is this: not water, but the way water forms what they call liquid bridges. The ability of water to stick to individual grains and pull them together.
You can do this while you're sitting at home. You can take some spit, lick it a few times between your fingers, and join it with your thumb and take those fingers apart.
If you look closely,
You'll see a little
small cylindrical,
liquid bridge between, in this case, my finger and my thumb.
and that can introduce extra attraction force between grains.
That is a liquid bridge.
It's the surface tension in water that pulls the grains together. No water and the grains of sand will behave just like little balls, which will run freely downhill. Add a bit of water and the liquid bridges form, sticking the grains together. So it's water that makes grains of sand stick together. The big question, though, is how much water you need to create the stickiest sand possible. Too much, and you get an unstable gloop. Too little, and this happens.
Oops.
You might think that a sandcastle falling down is no big deal, but imagine if this was the side of a mountain. Hundreds of tons of earth or sand crushing down into a village. It happens. And studying why it happens on a granular level is the true purpose of their work.
So if you look at the sand in desert, you can see that the angle is much lower, and if you look at the sandcastle, the angles are much higher.
We are trying to determine the basic equations, basic models, which will help us determine the conditions under which granular materials will flow or be stable.
So what is the magic formula for a sandcastle? Well, it turns out that it's 1 part of water to every 8 parts of sand.
They stick to each other, they form those liquid bridges between each other, and effectively the size of the grains now increased, and therefore they cannot flow as easily. So this is a granular jamming.
And what does Sandy Feet think of this application of science to her art?
Well, you know, theory is nice. Labs are nice. We need science to explain our world to us.
In the future, we would like to study the real sand and see if you mix water with real sand, what happens, and perhaps you get much higher angles than what we observe here.
We do not quite know how to apply this directly to real sand yet.
For real-world experience, I mean, if you really want to figure out what makes sand stand, you got to get to the beach, you got to get sand in your socks, you got to get dirty.
She's got a point, but you also need people in labs. People who understand why your sandcastle stands up or doesn't.